This is Doreen Young here with the Audio Percolator. I am here with Ronke Idowu Reeves, my sister, and we are going to talk about the Black American male rhythm and blues vocalist. And this will be an ongoing conversation. Okay, it says here, the Black American male rhythm and blues vocalist, masters of their craft, voices telling a story of sheer determination and combining vocal sounds from Africa and the Americas. These men are an integral part of American cultural expression and reveal the spectrum of our human experience and emotion through their contributions. This conversation acknowledges their place in American history.
The voices of these men embody the strength, beauty, and power of the Black American man by showcasing their complexities. Their voices embody love, longing, and fragility, which often push back against how they are traditionally defined. Our focus on their vocal performances and signature songs both honor and celebrate their remarkable representation.
Yes. So we've been wanting to do this and we're continuing. And thank you for being with me this evening, Ronke.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited about doing this.
Me too. We have a short list that we're working from tonight. The category that we're exploring, somewhat in an introductory way, so to speak, I guess. This category is called Singing Instrumentalists. And the first name on the list here is Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry, who I just realized passed away in March of 2017, which is yesterday. This is a man who he had such a great influence, a big influence on American culture, period. Rock and roll, guitar, vocal, live performance. Speak with me about him from your perspective.
Well, when I think of him as an originator of rock and roll. I know Little Richard, who we're going to talk about, I'm speaking in present tense with him, loved to say that he was the originator, the quasar and all of that. But when I think about Chuck Berry's music, the rhythms on the guitar, his vocals, his songwriting, a lot of people don't talk about his songwriting. He was a songwriter and he told stories in his music. There was a strong country and Western influence that he always had within his songs. Some Sweet Little 16, is like one of my favorite songs by him, more than Johnny Be Good and some of the other ones that people always talk about. But his rhythms, the rhythms in his guitar playing and the songwriting. I listened to a lot of Chuck Berry after he passed away. And what I love to do is explore some of the songs that I don't know too well and the albums and the compositions I don't know too well, which I did with him. And he was really, really, really a poignant songwriter. And one that I didn't, when I was younger, give him credit for being so. I didn't know, I didn't realize it, but the country and Western influence is really there. And I just really love the rhythmic, melodic sound of that guitar.
Yeah.
He did amazing things with that guitar.
Yeah, he's an amazing man. I mean, if you think about it, I think when we're not that far removed generationally, but none of us as kids really realized the value that the man had. I mean, he represented a former time, the rock, right. the era of rock and roll, and the performer for the oldies crowd, or whatever you want to call it, retro. Mm-hmm. But if you think about the influences you're talking about, country western, straight up rock and roll, the rhythm guitar, rhythm and blues. He was born in 1926. Right. That was a pivotal time. A lot of people that made a real serious mark came around that period, 25, 26. Mm-hmm. I don't think we realized, because, one of the things is he was such a happy-go-lucky type. He was a happy guy. You remember how he was kind of a joke, like he would joke and laugh and smile, and he was just a happy performer. You could see the joy he had in just what he did. So I don't want to say there was a lack of seriousness on the part of the viewer, but I think we were just watching an older man having a good time. That was the immediate image that we saw. But if you look closer, you're going to see a serious musician, like you said, who is a composer, a vocalist, a killer singer, and a really great performer who's loved by people of all cultures.
That's right. And that was the show that he put on for us. Happy go lucky, doing his, duck walk and all of that. But the business side of him was very serious. Of that generation, they wanted to be paid in cash and upfront because they were sometimes stiff for their gigs. Sometimes he had a shotgun in a suitcase as well, because of the time, and it would get dicey. Promoters didn't want to pay. But there was a seriousness about him, and people knew when it came to the money and the business that he didn't play. And as soon as that gig was over, Chuck was out. Like, he was gone. Like, the band would still be maybe still unpacking what he would be in the car, like, gone. Like, it was that was his MO of his. But he did the show. He gave the crowd what they wanted. As you said, it was a intermixed crowd of all races. Everyone loved his music, and I find all cultures, especially when he passed, some of the wonderful tributes that I read, and just some of the fans of the music talking about him, different generations, different races. Like, his music really touched everybody. But he was very serious about that business. The show was, spectacular. He gave it all on stage. But when it came time for the business, he was very serious about that.
And, that's something to be learned. I mean, it's sad that many people couldn't learn those lessons. I think men like Chuck Berry had that old time sensibility, but they knew how to keep a line between business and doing business and being personal, and not getting the two confused. And probably he'd been through a lot, like most musicians, and wasn't playing at that point. I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to this broadcast who has not spent time listening to Chuck Berry to do so. And it's interesting, these singing instrumentalists that we're talking about, a lot of them are very connected to country music, country and Western. Even Grandma talked about that, talked about sitting at home, listening to the radio with her family or with whomever they were with, and they were listening to country and Western. That's what was on the radio. And the stories that were told through those songs, and bluegrass and things like that, intermingled with our music, or the music of, I would say, the rural South, the West. I would say the rural South first, because that's where, when African Americans started moving west, that was a process, right. Where they would end up in the Midwest, and then, Ohio, Kansas, whatever have you, and then eventually California for those who made it that far. But a lot of the rural music has that country and Western influence to it. And all the singers we're going to talk about, all the musicians we're going to talk about, and I guess we've been looking at them from the perspective of them being singers, vocalists.
Right.
These ones were also known for their instruments that they played outside of their voice, outside of their vocal cords, and being guitarists or pianists. We can get back to Chuck Berry, but I wanted to move on to B.B. King, because that's another one who went around the same time, 2015. It just seems like it was yesterday. He was someone we never thought, like, he was like a constant feature that would never leave. And when he passed away, it was kind of like some kind of musical wake-up call or something for a lot of people, because it was like, oh, wait a minute, we just lost a treasure. And I think B.B. King, though he was super famous and his name is synonymous with the blues, he personally didn't seem to be someone who was all about the limelight on any
level. Not at all.
Even in his performances, there was a humility that came through,
I think it felt like he let the music be center stage. And I had read somewhere once that he couldn't play guitar and sing at the same time. And I looked at that as, letting his guitar, letting Lucille kind of, wail and do what she's going to do through his, instrumentation. And then he would concentrate on the vocal. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to his music, they're always two separate.
Right, right.
I read somewhere that he couldn't do both at the same time. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that, but it allowed me to focus on whatever riff or lick he was playing, and then I'd concentrate on the vocal. What does B.B. King mean to you when we talk about B.B. King and his
He always reminded me of our Aunt Janie. I don't know why, but he does.
I can see that facially.
And the reason why is like, I guess it's genetically, meaning in terms of the mixtures of African Americans with native and indigenous Americans. I can see that in him. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's what I see.
Okay.
And also, his vocal is an old school vocal that reflects history, period. Looks like he was born in 1925, right around the time of Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry, yeah.
That guitar was a way out or a way up or a way down the road for a lot of people.
Right.
If you so chose to embrace it. He seemed to me, in a sense, to be somewhat of a mystery. I don't know why. I guess it's because maybe personally, I just never knew much about him, but I do know the hits and I enjoy hearing him. And he has such a, I won't say just because he's famous, but he's got a vocal that you know him right away. There's no confusion.
As soon as he sings. Yeah.
The minute. And that's the sign of a true vocalist. And he also, his voice is a voice, when I say old school, I mean his voice is history. So when he sings any kind of lick, especially when he does those growls or like when he does those, it's like a Negro spiritual vibe. When he goes there in his vocal, he's giving you history. He's giving, like, I feel whatever he went through. Not necessarily bad, it's just a sound of a time and of the history here in this country. I hear it.
I agree. You can hear it's a very authoritative, and the growl and the rumble and it's almost like a preaching almost.
Yes,
like it, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like
yes.
That's why I love the fact that he's not playing guitar when he's singing, because I really want to focus on the feeling of the vocal. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what Ray Charles would do with his voice, but differently. Mm-hmm. For any of our listeners, I would love for them to look up the clip on YouTube that I sent you of Bobby Bland, B.B. King and James Brown together. James Brown really held back in that video. He was really just enjoying Bobby Blue Bland and B.B. King and grinning like a boy.
I'm probably going to try
among that.
Yeah, I'm going to try and put a link in the description box below.
But he was grinning like a little boy to be amongst that realm of blues man. Mm-hmm. James Brown was more funk, but he was with the blues, the blues men. You could feel he was excited about it. I actually got a chance to see B.B. King live when I was at Vibe. One of the things I love being at Vibe is I got to see a lot of live shows for free. Sometimes the music editors would come back and say, hey, I can't make this show. Who wants to go? Stuff like that. A friend of mine took me because he was really into B.B. King. He played the Apollo. I think we had like first row seats. It was very, the music industry, insider stuff. B.B. King was amazing. But what amazed me most about the experience was you had people in their grandma's age, women, who were yelling and screaming and throwing underwear on stage. They were grandma's age. And I was like, wow, what is going on here? I thought that was something only the younger folks did, but the older women in that crowd.
Oh, man.
This was like the 90s, okay? The 1990s. I don't know what year. It might have been 94, 95. But the old women were, he had, B.B. King.
He had the audience,
groupies, I guess. I mean, the women were really like
B.B. King groupies.
They were really in the front, and they were really. I never thought I would see that. They were people grandma's age. Wow.
That's funny. I think that's why he couldn't play and sing, or wouldn't play and sing at the same time, because I think he really is a vocalist.
Yeah.
So when you are singing, you don't want to deal with anything else. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
You want, because he's a lead guitarist. He doesn't do a lot of rhythm, you know,
Right.
and he is going to tell you his story through his vocal.
Mm.
And I like that his tonality, or I don't know if he's a baritone or a tenor or whatever. He just has a vocal that you respect, and that you can hear the influences, and it tells a story just by its tone, not the words, the tone of the voice. And you know how, like me, I'm an audio person, and maybe it's because I had problems with my sight when I was the first few days of my life. But I can always tell what mood people are in, how they're feeling, just by the tone of their voice. And
Wow.
BB King communicated so much through just the tone of his voice. You know what I mean?
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I can hear his voice now as we're talking about it.
Exactly. Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You
It
can hear him
definitely.
just, you can hear it. I don't even want to try and imitate him, but
No. No.
I'm feeling like I want to, but yeah, BB King. These are all people we're bringing up. We're going to end up talking more about these folks
Definitely.
in the coming conversations. Okay, now we're going to go back to Little Richard.
Little Richard. Oh, I love that man so much, and we just lost him last year during this
Yes.
pandemic.
Yes, 2020.
And it devastated me because I love Little Richard, and my favorite Little Richard era is the '60s Little Richard, when he got a little wild and crazy with the makeup, and his jumpsuits got very tight. The live stage shows from that period are amazing. They are amazing. I mean, he just, I feel like he was very tame of the time in the 50s, because you had to be, suited up, got a little wild, putting the leg up on the piano. But by that point in the 60s, he actually was headed toward the church a little bit after that, because I don't know what's going on in his personal life. He's about to go over the deep end. But if you look at any of the interviews from that time, interviews with Dick Cavett, any of that stuff, it's all on YouTube, because I think I watched every interview after he passed. He was truly amazing. That's what you call an amazing man with an amazing life. I just wanted to go back a little bit, and I wanted to go back a little bit to talk about his beginning and how he had to wear that makeup, and put on that effeminate vibe persona to get into the clubs that he could get into back in Macon, Georgia, back in the day. That was all very calculated. And it was very, very, he wanted to come off as very pretty and prissy, because he was seen as a non-threat to play in some of the integrated secret clubs they had in Atlanta, in Macon, Georgia. So I just thought that was a genius move for anyone and it was very forward of its time. He knew that he could get further with that look than to come in, strong and, virile and very alpha male. That wasn't going to cut
Alpha black male. Yeah.
Which is seen as even more of a threat. I mean, think about we're talking about when he was born, 1932. This is coming off a little bit after BB King and Chuck Berry in the South. Those were very, very dangerous times for our people. So yeah. I just think that was genius, that was a part of his marketing strategy.
Yeah. And you think about Little Richard as a trendsetter. So many people copied his style because of the marketability of it, I think. But when I think about Little Richard as a musician, as a singer and a piano player, it's the groove. I mean, he had the ultimate groove going. I mean, it was like steady, rock steady, like James Brown rock steady. Like it ain't, you're in the pocket, ain't no such thing as falling out of it. Right. It's like coming from the background of Fats Waller and other boogie woogie musicians from the 40s that kept it popping. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't going nowhere. That groove was solid as a rock. But then, he took it to another level, because his vocal, it's like pre-George Clinton screaming in key, making you just flip out, because in my last interview, somebody said, he just said, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door and I'll get it myself. But he said, without the before I get it myself, you know, it ain't the same thing. It has a different meaning. And that was making me laugh when Dr. Twiggs said that. He said, open up the door and I'll get it myself.
Facts,
we were talking about the African-American aesthetic in that part of the conversation. And Little Richard is the epitome of that when it comes to music, with his loud, but in the pocket and in the key, in the groove,
always in key.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, and keeping that, and they worked hard for the money, so they could keep that up. That pace was kept up for as long as the gig lasted.
Yeah.
And people were they went crazy, and other musicians were just, you know, you're talking about people that have seen stuff in the South, you know. We talked about people that were imported into this country to pick cotton and make indigo and grow cotton rather, and things like that. And I'm just fresh off this last conversation, but I connected to this because when you see how hard folks worked throughout the year on these gigs and how hard they worked on each gig. So I don't know, Little Richard always struck me as a man who earned his keep. And when he sang from the time I was a child, you listened to him. That's a man who commanded attention when he got on the mic. And then his songs and his grooves were catchy. They were somewhat a little bit out there, but it didn't matter because you knew the groove, you knew the song because you heard it, and he made that impression. So I find him to be a unique facet of the African-American experience in America. You know, it's just he's basically a trip. Basically, he's a trip.
And the foundation, really, I mean, again, when I talk about the trilogy of this rock and roll music as we know it, his energy, the performance, the musicality, the way he played that piano, it was like otherworldly of its time. Like nobody was playing piano like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the mixture of the gospel, but it was rockabilly. It was the energy, that energy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people point toward his piano playing as making them want to be in rock and roll. Elton John, so many people. There's a long list of piano players who said, when I heard Little Richard, I knew this is what I had to do. Like it was like before Little Richard and after in terms of how he played that piano.
You can see the influence on Elton John. You can see the influence on people like Billy Preston, which of course, definitely goes to the Beatles and other people. I'm not doing this conversation in order, which I don't want to do that. I like to jump around. You know what I mean? Right. But Little Richard, I'll be happy to see a real film on him. There have been some good ones.
I thought that the TV movie they did
that was Leon, excellent. That was excellent.
Yeah, it was directed by Robert Townsend, and Leon did it. And actually, Little Richard was alive, so he got to consult about the factual thing. It was a TV movie version.
Yeah,
I would advise people to revisit that until they do.
I would like to see an actual film. I mean,
I think that's a good place to start.
It truly is
involved. He was involved in it, and it kind of tells you the overview. Yeah,
and maybe I'm looking for a documentary and not an actual like live, like a reenactment. I think I'm looking more for a comprehensive documentary.
Right. That I don't know if that exists. It probably will exist now that we just lost him. I also wanted to just say that if people are looking for songs or clips to hear more of the Little Richard experience, one of my favorite songs by him is "The Girl Can't Help It." He has a ton of them, but that one to me, just the production of it and the rhythm of it, that song really rocks and rolls. And he also helped to induct Otis Redding into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame site. Sang Otis Redding songs beautifully, gorgeous. The voice, I mean, he sounded just like Otis when he sang them. They both were making Georgia. So he felt very akin to him.
Mm-hmm.
They knew each other in the industry in passing, and he gave a lovely dedication to him. It was very beautiful. It rambled and it was all over the place and it was messy and it was sloppy. And they had to eventually kind of reel him back in, but everything that he said was from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, he would kind of go off on a tangent of when he was talking about the different songs by Otis, and he would sing them beautifully in key. A gorgeous singing voice. I mean, this guy could play the piano, but his voice was amazing. He could go very high. He had to scream, but he was a beautiful vocalist as well.
Yeah, so, well, we're gonna revisit that during the Southern Men conversation that we're gonna have, because there's a the way they treated the music is ridiculous. Like I guess they're all Southern.
I want to stop here because I don't know if you can hear that truck in the back. I don't know. Can you hear that?
Actually, no. I think your headphones are
available. Let me just close the window a little bit because it's really
okay. That's cool.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes. So one of my favorites is Money Honey. It just makes me laugh, but it not just makes me laugh, but it's also funky, like the way it's treated, the way he does it. But I'm glad we're bringing up recordings that people should listen to. And yes, I will go back and listen to The Girl Can't Help It. Yeah. BB King, listen to Everything You Can Find. Chuck Berry, listen to Everything You Can Find.
Everything you can find.
Everything you can find. Yeah. Yeah. The next one on my list is Ray Charles.
Wow.
Which, it's, the movie kind of gave us the story. But I want to talk about just that vocal, because he could play and he was definitely an instrumentalist, but his voice
would bring tears to your eyes.
It was,
where that voice goes when he holds a note. It could bring tears to your eyes.
Yeah. We had done a piece of music not a piece of music. We had done a visual thing regarding his song America, his version of America, which was telling a story of a Black family. It was a videography thing that Ronnie Cruz did with the artwork of Najee Dorsey. Actually, it was interesting. But his voice is the teller. It's a teller of a story, of the tale, of the sorrow, of the feeling, of the core. His voice is like the soil. It's the soil. Yeah. It's the soil that we're standing on. It's like, I don't know. How do you? I mean, even Hit the Road Jack, the groove on that. It's like, how many times did you start singing Hit the Road Jack in the kitchen and have to just keep singing it? Hit the road, Jack. I mean, you just got you. It's like a mantra. Hit the road, Jack.
I love what I love about that song is that it's such a African American tale in the song. Our songs sometimes just get right to the point, and
basically,
and don't you come back no more.
Right. There was a very intellectual version of that song, not Hit the Road Jack, but the thought of it with the Come On Home by Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. That mom used to listen to that. Okay. And it was basically saying Hit the Road Jack, but Ray Charles just simplified the message. Completely. And basically, it's what you call relatable by everyone. Mm-hmm. And all these artists on our list are relatable globally. Every and anyone can understand where they're coming from. He was born in 1930, passed away 2004, which was fairly recent times. You remember his hilarious appearance in Blues Brothers, which I will never forget. That if anyone wants to just go watch Blues Brothers and check out Ray Charles as the music store owner, that is very funny. And I don't know we don't really play Ray Charles's music that much. I think sometimes we do, but he's not someone we go to all the time. He's someone that exists as part of the library. And every now and then you'll play a Ray Charles song, like at a serious moment,
Right, right.
like You Don't Know Me or something like that. But I think the reason for that is kind of because a lot of his recordings were like 50s, right? There were like some 50s
50s,
stylized recordings that had those I Can't Stop Loving You vocals in the background. And,
right.
you know, when it comes to what they would call at that time was commercial lounge music, you know, the lounge music of that time, there were certain stars or performers that had that genre kind of in their hands, you know.
Right.
The Frank Sinatras, the Stephen Edie's, or maybe not Stephen Edie. Stephen Edie was maybe more closer to 60s, but so Ray Charles was more the he was like the voice from the Black Southern past or whatever, but modernized to the full.
Modernized to the full, and I think that the movie Ray, to star Jamie Foxx, directed by Taylor Hackford, helped to bring his music to the forefront. I think that after that point, the film was released, they sampled Ray for the Gold Digger song that Kanye West did. So I think a whole new generation got to hear this sound. But I feel like Ray's always with us. It's not, I don't know if it's something that we go to often. Well, I don't know. I listen to these artists. I don't know about everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. We carry him with us. We carry him with us.
He's kind of with us. Yeah, I mean, definitely Georgia on my mind is usually always played for anything involving that city, something to do with Atlanta. That comes up often. They always use his version. I don't know how the family's using his music in how they're using the catalog, because I noticed after Bill Withers passed, I noticed his family's using his catalog all over the place in, you know, commercials and stuff. Same thing for Aretha Franklin. I don't know if they did the same thing with Ray's music. So I think more of their music is still kind of in the ether, just because how the family's choosing to use it.
Right. I think that's part of it too. Yeah.
But I think Ray is just he's a part of our fabric of the music and culture, and I think he's just always with us. I can't say it any other way.
And that's part of his power, because like a Bob Marley or John Lennon or someone like that, or a BB King, I think he does something very important. He gets people that perhaps might be uncaring to care.
Right.
Because his music was so well crafted and released at a time when several different types of people were listening to it in terms of social class and ethnicity, and or at least here in the States, I should say. And when people hear it, they're brought together with it. They're brought together by his music, meaning the emotions. We may not be physically together, but our emotions suddenly harmonize on a human level because we're listening to this man's voice.
This is true. And this is also a man who at the height of his career switched gears from rhythm and blues to do country, because he was a huge fan of country music. And he did country music because he loved the music so much. His modern sounds and country, he did that in 1962, totally pivoting away from what he was known for and known as. So that only widened his fan base. And
I think I'm going to pull that up.
Yeah.
And that's a good year, 62. That's pre the movements of 67. That's gonna be a next listen to for me. Thank you, Ronke. Thank you. I'm gonna be getting that one. So we're probably gonna come back to him too. I'm sure we may later on do some sort of all-star conversation, like the top 3 or 5. Next one on my list is George Benson. George Benson. And that's, you know, a modern man who encompasses a lot of our experience in one person. I met him as a teenager. And I
Wow.
liked, this story's corny, but I still like this story. I think I was at Atlantic Studios or something, you know, near Columbus Circle. And I was super young, like maybe like 18 or something. And I just kind of bumped into him in the studio. I don't know, I was there to see somebody else or whatever. And I turned around, he was like, "Oh, hi, I'm George Benson." And I went, "Oh, hey, how you doing? No, nice to meet you. I'm Doreen." I said, "Excuse me for a minute." And I went to the bathroom and I went, because I had to let it out and I couldn't do that in front of him because that would have been not cool.
No,
And
you were very cool.
I was like, "Oh yeah, nice meeting you. My name's Doreen. How you doing?" You know, when you were at Atlantics, you know, sometimes people would pop in like that for whatever they were doing, maybe a session or to see somebody. And the thing about George Benson is that most people don't realize how special George Benson is. And even at that age, without even the knowledge I have now, I knew that, you know.
When was this roughly? What year was that, would you say?
This was probably like 80,
okay.
81-ish.
Wow.
Something like that. Born 1943.
43.
It's like, yes. He has a bio that everyone should read if they get a chance, just like on Wikipedia or whatever, just to get an understanding of what he's done and who he is. He's an amazing instrumentalist, a beautiful singer, and kind of always was a little bit under the radar until that On Broadway song came out. 'Cause I can play this here guitar.
Oh, right, on Broadway, right?
Yeah. And I won't stop till I'm a star on Broadway.
I think that was the first George Benson song I ever heard and really paid attention to.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think that's what made him a mainstream hit. But I think people understood him as kind of an R&B singer or a pop hit. It was a jazz cut. I mean, he riffed and scattered. Right. And that was the beauty of songs in the 70s, some of the music of that time, because it combined all these flavors, R&B and jazz and everything. That was so cool. Yeah. Anybody who doesn't know George Benson need to go back and check out On Broadway. It was a remake.
It was.
With so much fresh life, like the breath of life was put into that song.
That I thought that was his song. That was his original song. I didn't know. It was
exactly that it was a cover. But it's just showing it. He demonstrated some amazing things with that song. For me, as a young person hearing it, it was like, wow, this to me, he sounded like a working musician who had to make this cover work. Often, you know, we'll try to take covers and make them ours or make them appealing in a new way to an audience.
Right.
Sometimes those things can't be captured. That was a live recording, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And it was they captured the feeling.
Right.
And you felt the energy. The way they were doing recordings at that time was special. A lot of bands, the way they were recording their music during that time in New York City, we have to do a discussion about that. And
that'll never happen again. That was a long gone era.
I may have to bring in some producers and people for a conversation with you and I to talk about that, because the techniques and the groups that were, you know, we're talking like the period of, I guess, GRP Records, Quincy Jones's work in the 70s, and a few others. You know, Quincy worked with a lot of different people at that time. You had people like Billy Joel and others around at that time too. And you had a lot of the people who were going to be the progenitors of the smooth jazz movement. They put a term to that. You know, it wasn't supposed to be that, but they put a term to that. Right after WRVR disappeared. Remember, I don't know if you remember RVR. You might be too young.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, everyone can look up RVR, see if you can find some old shows. That was a marker in time where you had just jazz, and all of a sudden you had smooth jazz and Kenny G, and we always put Kenny G to that, and Michael Bolton and others who were doing that type of mainstream soft jazz. But the people I knew pre that title were people like Michael McDonald and Brenda Russell, who got pushed into that category. But, you know, and George Benson kind of fell with Breezin', the album Breezin', and with the Quincy Jones work, he wasn't really lumped in that category at all, because you couldn't categorize him, because he was just so good. You just couldn't, he was just George Benson.
He really was.
He wasn't a this or a that. And that's what makes him so special. He was a jazz musician that could sing, he could play himself, he could just play, and he could sing, he could do both.
He could.
We talked about Give Me the Night earlier, and how much it was such a mainstream song, but wow.
That song, Give Me the Night, Turn Your Love Around, like all of that stuff was just, it was really the soundtrack of that era. I think it came out in the summer. Everybody was playing it from every car. Every time a car stopped at the light in front of Linden Plaza, a high rise, you would hear, that's a song you heard everywhere at the beach. It just evokes like really good times, and it's just sunny days. Like, it just makes you feel good. Road skating, all of it. And the minute I could listen to that song on a loop repeatedly all day. Like, I never get tired of that song.
Exactly. And you can hear it any day of the week, and you're like, oh, you know, it just was it's as fresh as the first day it came out.
And when I was younger, I didn't realize that Quincy Jones had produced it. I didn't realize until later, like maybe a couple of years ago. Rod Temperton wrote "Give Me the Night."
It has all those. It has all those elements.
The signature, sound.
The echoes, the patty vocal,
the string arrangements,
the break sections.
Even the way it's written, it's a Rod
Temperton the horn
type
section.
of song in terms of the. But it all makes sense now. I'm like, wow, that makes sense of the song. You have George Benson, amazing guitarist, vocalist, and Quincy Jones. No wonder why I can't get that song out of my head. I never wanted to end in my head.
Well, it's a New York City type song too, even though I know everybody else has their connection to it. But during that time, it was a Give Me the Night situation. And then that was the song that defined your night and your vibe and your and it's like, it's about groove.
Good.
Yeah.
And it still has that power to this day.
Yes,
the breakbeat, everything. The breakbeat in the middle, like just,
And I wonder if Louis Johnson was on the bass.
I'm sure. I think all the
because that pickup is so motivating. So, and the thing about George Benson is, if you look at his discography, like I have to look at his discography at some time. I see his list of Grammys from 77 to 2007. But I have not seen a discography in a while. But for anyone who has not experienced George Benson, seeing him live was just fabulous. I'm not sure what's going on with him right now. I know he's had some ups and downs. I think he might have even lost a child. I don't know. But he is definitely a special musician. And
he is,
and his scatting is kind of why I have Louis Armstrong next on the list, because see, the scatting.
Well, wait, hold on. Before we get into Louis Armstrong, I just want to say one last thing about George Benson.
Yes, please. No, we're not gonna move. We're not moving right away. I'm just connecting the scatting. Go ahead.
Okay. But I'm gonna say, please revisit his version of "Greatest Love of All," because that's one of my favorite versions of the greatest soundtrack. I have really, really visceral memories of that movie and that soundtrack, because
that came before Whitney Houston. Everybody, it was George Benson.
My mom took us to see that movie, me and Sunda, and it had a profound effect on us to see Muhammad Ali playing Muhammad Ali.
I know, I remember that too.
But the music in that was so beautiful, and some of it George sang a cappella. But his version of "Greatest Love of All," that soft, melodic, quiet version of it, it has to be.
Isn't it great?
So beautiful.
That's the one I learned.
It moves you to tears almost. His voice is so pretty on that vocal. The vocal is so pretty on the song. It actually can move you to tears.
That's the one I learned. It is a reflective, contemplative version of the song.
Yeah.
It reflects
quiet
version, it reflects what a Muhammad Ali would be doing at that part of his life.
Right.
Which looking back, looking to see what, what are they doing? What a history. I think I'm gonna have to look up that soundtrack for that movie.
Please go back. We
I need
had
to go
that
pull
soundtrack.
that up.
And I used to stare at the album cover and play it all the time. And it has a lot of instrumental stuff. And I did, because it was this wonderful illustration of Ali, and they had like little portraits from the movie, like little scenes from the movie, all illustrated. But when you're a kid, you see a movie like that, you think it's the most amazing movie ever. I just love it because Ali played himself. I just, his brother was his brother.
Yeah.
Like they were all
Dad
in it.
loved boxing, so.
But the music in that movie, the music was so beautiful. And please revisit Greatest Love of All.
Yeah, that's another thing to do. Let's revisit Greatest Love of All, that soundtrack from the Muhammad Ali movie. The scatting. He scats and plays like nobody's business. And Louis Armstrong, they say he taught Billie Holiday certain things.
Wow.
Because of the way he would, he was definite, and he showed you something special, Louis Armstrong. If we had a horn player in this conversation, of course this would just be another beginning of this topic. But Louie Armstrong, he didn't have to have a beautiful velvet voice to make you understand what he was singing about and to hit it perfectly and move you emotionally. Right. And Louis Armstrong is from another era. That's another era.
He really is.
That is another era. One of my favorite recordings is him and Ella Fitzgerald, Autumn in New York.
I was just going to say, they did a whole album together.
Yeah.
And that's something that everyone should check out. The raspiness and roughness of his voice mixed with her voice, which is like silky, smooth, melted butter. The two of those voices together, it's like missing pieces of a puzzle. Like it's just, every song is just perfect. It's like that perfect soundtrack to your Sunday afternoon if you were just relaxing and chilling or making yourself some brunch or something. It's just, that's a beautiful, beautiful album the two of them put out together.
Exactly. People would talk most people talk about his instrumentation, him being a wind instrumentalist, a trumpet player. That's what people talk about. Because he was probably one of the best ever. But the thing about Louis Armstrong is he lived at a time when, I guess, where was he born? New Orleans?
He was born,
if I'm not mistaken.
I think he was.
Yes.
Yes.
And he, they called him Satchmo.
Yeah.
And they called him Pops, it says. He grew up at a time, when people were playing Dixieland and things like that. And you had to do certain things if you wanted to earn a living.
Yeah.
That, bulging your eyes, smiling a certain way, which a lot of it is part of your personality, perhaps, but there might have been some extra showmanship that was put on to just not to be hassled by other people. Again, and to become very popular.
That's the genius marketing, pre the term marketing that many of our Black American artists had to do to project their music to the next level, to be seen as non-threatening, to fit into all those different worlds that they wanted to get in. And people loved Louie Armstrong's music. I mean, we were talking about that before. It was a sound that they had to have. They had to have his sound, his vocals, his horn playing. Like people, once he came out, people gravitated toward him. Like he was an instant success.
His improvisation, musically and vocally, is like the cornerstone of jazz. one of the cornerstones. I think of Jelly Roll Morton, and I think of other early jazz artists, even Scott Joplin and people like that,
right,
that go way back. And I think about, you know, Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith and those ones. But I think of Louis Armstrong. To me, he's from that part of the past. When I was a little girl, I told you he was in the hospital at Beth Israel. Did I tell you that story?
no,
Because I was born in Beth Israel, and I was having some issue. Mom and Dad took me to the hospital there to see the doctor, and Louis Armstrong was admitted at the same time. I wasn't admitted, but while I was in the waiting room, I realized I think I was on his floor or something, and I begged them to let me see him. They would not.
Wow.
But I did draw him a picture. They promised me they would take it to him.
Oh, that's amazing.
I think I drew a picture.
Story.
Yeah, I think I drew him a picture, if I can remember. I know I wanted to. I wonder if I got it. I think I got it out. You have to, this is going back, you know what I mean?
Wow.
But as a little girl, I wanted to see him so bad because he is history.
Really?
He is history. You know what I mean? Like, that was my touching, like the earliest musician I can think of. And I've always been fascinated with the oldest of musicians because of their early styles. And yes, they have influences from Africa, from the Americas and Europe, all combined to make a jazz, or, you know, a mixture. Or I even have been listening to work songs and things like that. But Louis Armstrong, he embodied all of it for me. That he had that strong African presence.
Yeah.
He had that straight up husky, hanging out at the juke joint type voice.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that pierce you with that trumpet, hit that note. He could be he would dress suave. You know, he would look great. You remember how he would look? He was good.
Really sharp.
He had style. You know, he had swag.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would just like the scatting and the jazz riffs are like, that's why everybody loves Louis Armstrong, because he's like the epitome of African American swag. He's like the man. You know, like that's who we would invite over if he was around, you know. And, you know, all the musicians that came after him emulate him. Any horn player knows him, respects him, emulates him. He opened up the doors in a lot of ways. And the men who play saxophone or trumpet, you notice how they take a lead role often.
Right.
The John Coltrane's, the Miles Davis. These men, because that was their way of asserting their authority, or their ability to take the lead. They were often inhibited, you know, they were often oppressed or suppressed, stopped from taking the lead, stopped from being themselves, stepping out front. That was their place to do it. And, you know, Louis Armstrong, basically, he just reminds you of that man who steps out front.
Do you think he got a raw deal historically when the newer sound came around and people kind of rejected like what he represented in terms of, you know, him being, you know, the way he chose to perform, how loud he was, or how they perceived him playing, or maybe pandering to the crowd too much? Do you think that he was looked at unfairly somewhat by the next generation?
Somewhat, but I think it's a lack of respect and a lack of understanding or insight. It's the same thing as people who, you know, talk about Black Americans a certain way. They don't understand what's going on. And because of you know what I mean? It's, you know, it's the same type of misunderstanding. And I think many African Americans have that misunderstanding about other people who are in different parts of the world, who are of color. And we don't understand their story because we're not there and we haven't grown up there, you know. And these new musicians, the new generation, some of them don't respect and understand what those musicians did so that to
Mhm.
make it easy for them to do what they do.
Right.
Not that those musicians necessarily knew they were doing that. They were surviving, but some of their sacrifices, you know, people definitely climbed up on top of their heads to get where they're going. And I think people like the Marsalis brothers, you know, respect Louie because they're from New Orleans as well. And
Right.
they understand some of the hardship. And then their dad and people who came before them made sure they were clear on the story and the narratives. But I think a lot of people became strange later
Mhm.
on. I'm not going to judge anybody right now because also I may not agree with their views, but I know that because they had been hurt as musicians or whatever, they felt a need to break away from every and anything that was like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But sometimes, you know, when you don't have balance and when you don't have all the facts, sometimes you need to step back and kind of get everything straight, get the story straight
Right.
before you make a judgment on something. You can make your own personal judgment and in terms of how you want to live your life, but you don't necessarily want to that everyone may not be entitled to that information.
I'm
Because
glad that you said that. I
mhm,
think it should be said about him.
absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I loved him. So, you know, and that's just me. I knew what was going on because, you know, our mom was no shrinking daisy. You
Right.
know, our mom taught us what was going on and what was happening with the history. We saw what was going on television. You know, even though we didn't really have to deal with certain things because we were always taught that we mattered,
Right.
whether anyone knew that or not. You know, um, however, I want to pick this up. I want to continue this conversation. I might want to stop here
Okay.
and do a part two. How
Okay.
do you feel about that?
I'm totally fine with
Because I'm
that.
a little tired. And I
Okay.
think we have enough to like because there's more to say about that Louis Armstrong situation, and the next two in this category are pretty intense. So I don't want to like I don't want
We
to
don't want to shortchange
yeah,
anybody.
I don't want to
Yeah.
shortchange anybody. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
singing instrumentalist part one, we did it. Sis,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much.
No problem,
Ronke
sis.
Idowu Reeves, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being with me today. Thank
This
you for
was great.
thank you for being in my life, sis. You know I love you.
I love you too. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
in mine.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon, okay?
Definitely.
Okay, have a great night.
Okay, you too.
Next time, part two, singing instrumentalists. This has been Audio Percolator, the Black male vocalist, the Black American male rhythm and blues vocalist. Well, we'll simplify that. Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.